Hello, this is Kate from dailytarotgirl.com, and this is your weekly tarot card reading. I'm using the Dark Mansion Tarot for this week's reading. And before we get into the reading, I just want to let you know that I've just opened registration on my 4-week tarot course on intuitive tarot reading. And if you're interested, I'm going to put the link to find out more in the description box below this video. All right. Okay, so my intention with these 3 cards is to get kind of an overview of the week ahead so that we get some new ideas and inspiration. So let's start with the first card. This is for Monday and Tuesday. All right. So we're starting off with the 8 of Swords. Now, there's something about the 8 of Swords that I love. I love how dramatic it is and how intense it is. And whenever it shows up in a reading, it's always to encourage you to really step into your own power and lift the blindfold that you're wearing and really challenge yourself to look at the facts, see things clearly, and start making choices and decisions to improve your situation instead of waiting for the tide to turn or waiting for, someone to rescue you or offer you an opportunity. This is about creating your own opportunities and forging your own path rather than waiting for someone else to do it for you. Usually the 8 of Swords signifies problems and obstacles that we face and the need to solve our own problems as opposed to waiting for someone else to do it for us or waiting to be given a formula on how to solve our own problems. This is about really finding your own inner resources and your own inner strength. So what does it mean for us at the beginning of the week? So as we start this week, so Monday and Tuesday, it's a good time to question yourself and ask yourself the question, is the way that I'm seeing things and experiencing things actually the way things are? Because there's the truth and then there's our interpretation of the truth. So there's what is actually happening, which is, facts and what's actually going on. And then there's our experience and our interpretation of what's going on. And sometimes those things match up. Sometimes they're not quite the same. Sometimes they're wildly different. And so the 8 of Swords says, how you see yourself and how you think of yourself, particularly when it comes to your limitations and obstacles, isn't necessarily how others see you, and it isn't necessarily an accurate reflection of how you really are and what you are actually capable of. So you're probably capable of a lot more than you give yourself credit for. So let's have a look at the middle of the week. So this is Wednesday and Thursday. And here we have 7 of Cups. And the 7 of Cups is a card of choice and options. And as you can see, there's a guy who's kind of looking at, he's looking at this shelf with all these different things. And there's 7 different options, 7 different things. He's kind of pondering them. And sometimes when this card comes up, it can represent feeling a little bit overwhelmed at, all the different options you might have, or just all the different things you need to focus on. And it can represent that sort of feeling of not wanting to spread yourself too thin, but also not wanting to close any doors. So the 7 of Cups encourages you to, ponder all your options. Really engage with, what is possible? What are the options? What are the different paths and doorways that you can walk through here? What is being offered to you? But at some point, you need to make a choice. And I think there's always this fear that if we choose to focus on one particular thing, we'll be neglecting all the other things. And that if we choose one doorway, then we're closing all the other doorways. And sometimes that is true. But the Seven of Cups is saying to be in this perpetual pondering state, where you can't make a decision, where you're sort of indecisive, is really just as bad. So the Seven of Cups is saying, take your time to consider your options, but just don't wait forever. It can also be a card of daydream and getting lost in fantasy instead of being kind of practical and being more of a realist. So kind of what I said when I was talking about the Eight of Swords and how I said that thing about how, sometimes how we see ourselves isn't necessarily reality. Sometimes we have kind of a we're looking at ourselves and our lives through a distorted lens, and we don't always see things clearly. And the Seven of Cups is also kind of encouraging you not to get too caught up in fantasy, to make decisions and to not, what's another way of describing this? I feel like there's something else with this card that I want to express. I feel like the message is about not getting lost in, not fantasy, because I'm a big fan of daydreaming. I think daydreaming is wonderful. Escapism, that's the word I'm looking for. Don't get lost in escapism. So sometimes we get lost in fantasy, and sometimes that fantasy is like a daydream, and we can come up with some really creative ideas, and it can be a really wonderful way to recharge our batteries and inspire ourselves. But sometimes it's just distraction, like we're caught up in a fantasy or a daydream, and it's really just a way of checking out. And it's really just a way of, what was that word I originally said? Escaping. It's a way of escaping. And Seven of Cups is saying, know the difference between healing and maybe even productive daydreaming and creative daydreaming, and daydreaming that is more like escapism. So let's have a look at the end of the week. This is for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And here we have the Two of Swords. And this is interesting because the Two of Swords is also about indecision, kind of what I was touching on with the Seven of Cups. And like the Eight of Swords, the first card, there's a ribbon going across her eyes. So there's like a blindfold, just like the Eight of Swords. So what a coincidence that the only two cards that are kind of like this have appeared in this reading. All right, so what is the message for us? So let me talk a little bit about the Two of Swords. Two of Swords is, like I said, it's a card of indecision. So it can come up when you're feeling indecisive, when you can't really make up your mind about which path to go down. But it can also signify sort of being stuck in your head and, not being able to move forward with a decision because you're so stuck in your head. Now, the blindfold to me represents the need to tune out or block out distractions and go within. So think about what happens when you put a blindfold on. And, even think about what happens when you put earplugs in. You tune out sight and sound and those things that can distract you. And it kind of forces you to go inward. And so the Two of Swords is encouraging you to go inward and to connect with your intuition, because sometimes a choice and a decision cannot be made with mind alone, because mind wants answers and information. And sometimes you don't have all the information you need to make an informed decision. And the mind hates that. And the mind won't move forward until it has enough information. But this is where your intuition comes in, because your intuition is like your sixth sense, and it can gather or feel into the information that you need to make the decision. And so this is where, you don't need to rely on mind alone to make a decision. You need to incorporate your gut instincts, your heart, your feelings into the decision-making process. All right, so I'm just going to kind of zoom out here, and I'm going to look at these 3 cards together and see if there's anything else popping out at me. Just the main thing I noticed was that blindfold that appears in the first card and the last card. And even with the 7 of Cups, we can't see his face, which is interesting. He's kind of turned away from us. So what does that blindfold represent? And I'd love it if you shared in the comment section what you feel it represents. I'm going to share what I think it does, but I'd love to hear your take on it too. So I think that the blindfold, like I said, represents tuning out distraction, going within, but it can also represent, not seeing things clearly and the need to lift the blindfold. And like in the case of the 8 of Swords, I think it's about, not seeing things clearly and needing to lift your blindfold and to see what's really actually going on. But in the 2 of Swords, it's different. It's more about tuning out distraction so that you can go inward and connect with your intuition. Oh goodness, I've been babbling for 11 and a half minutes. Okay, so I'm going to wrap the reading up here. It looks like an interesting week. Maybe not the easiest week. I think there may be a few little obstacles here and there. I think decision making is a big one. And I think the theme is really about connecting with your inner self, with your inner power and your inner voice more than anything. So yeah, interesting week. It would be interesting to see how it all plays out. So thank you so much for watching. If you want to learn more about tarot reading, you can check out my website, dailytarotgirl.com, and I'll put the link to my site in the description box below this video. And I hope you have a wonderful week.